everybody. It's time once again for a 2021-2022 NHL season preview. Today, we're going to take a look at a Central Division team that has been consistently in the postseason, but the last couple of years have really not performed the way they wanted to in the playoffs. And we've made some changes this offseason, a couple of significant moves. It's going to be pretty interesting to see how things go for them here in 2021-22, whether they're good enough, whether they're coming up a little bit short again. We're going to wait and see. This, of course, is the St. Louis Blues, and we're going to get into it here and preview their upcoming season. Before we start, I just ask you, please subscribe and hit that thumbs up. Helps out the channel an absolute ton and is greatly appreciated. But let's get started. And before we look ahead, we have to look back. Last season, St. Louis went 27-20-9 for 63 points and a fourth place finish in the West Division. They obviously got the last playoff spot in the West, and it wasn't a great year for the Blues. This was definitely a little bit of a down year compared to what we've been seeing from them. I mean, obviously they won the Cup in 2019, and they were expecting to be, I think, better than a fourth-place team, but they were still able to make the playoffs. Unfortunately, they got absolutely destroyed by Colorado in the first round, and that's kind of been the last couple years. They just haven't gotten it done in the postseason, and they're certainly going to be trying to change that this year. They were a decent offensive team, actually. They scored 2.98 goals per game, which almost 3 goals a game, not like top 5, top 10, anything like that, but a pretty average offense, and certainly wasn't a huge problem for the team, but they weren't all that great defensively. They also gave up 2.98 goals goals against per game, and that's definitely a number that they need to decrease this year. You can't give up almost 3 goals a game and expect to be a really good team. That's just not good enough defensively. And that's definitely going to be an area of emphasis this season for the Blues, is trying to cut down on those goals against. Their power play was actually very good last year, 23.2% on the power play. I didn't even realize how good their power play was last season until looking at these numbers, and they actually really got it done on the man advantage. However, their penalty kill was not good, just 77.8% on the penalty kill. That is not going to cut it either. Another area that they need to get better in this season if they're going to really compete in the Central, not just for a playoff spot, but to actually win in the playoffs. So, those two, defensive areas of the game, I think, definitely need to be improved. While the offense wasn't really a problem last year, they got to do a better job of keeping the puck out of their net. They've made some changes this offseason. The additions and subtractions list here, obviously more on the subtraction side, but they did make 2 big additions that I like a lot. And as far as players leaving, we've got Jaden Schwartz, who left in free agency, Mike Hoffman, who left in free agency, Vince Dunn was taken by Seattle in the expansion draft, Carl Gunderson retired, Sammy Blais was traded away, Zach Sanford was traded away, and Jacob Delarose was not re-signed, and he is now signed over in Europe. He was a depth forward anyway, who really didn't play much, but a pretty decent list of players there no longer on this team. Schwartz being gone, it's going to obviously be a change. He was a Blue for a long time. Unfortunately, he was injured for a lot of that time, but still, that's a hit out of your lineup. Losing Hoffman hurts the power play. I think it helps in other areas, but it definitely hurts the power play. We'll see if they can make up that production on the man advantage with him no longer there. Vince Dunn, a very up and down Blues career. He was a guy that was highly, highly touted when he first came up, and then he went through some rough stretches where it seems like fans and the team started to kind of sour on him a little bit. He was always involved in trade speculation because he never really became that real top guy that they thought he was going to, but he still was a pretty solid defenseman for them a lot of the time. And that's definitely a loss off of the back end that is going to be noticeable. Carl Gunderson, obviously a veteran guy in that locker room. That's that's going to have an effect. Now, he did miss quite a bit of time with injury, but still, he was an important part of that Cup team in 2019. So that's definitely still a loss. Sammy Blais and Zach Sanford were kind of second, third-ish line players who were both traded away, and I don't think they're huge losses as long as they're replaced. And when we look over at the addition side of things, we'll talk about, while I especially like the Sammy Blais trade that got them Pavel Buchnevich, and then Delarose is just a depth guy. But moving over to the additions, Pavel Buchnevich was obviously their biggest addition of this offseason. They traded Sammy Blais and a second-round pick to the New York Rangers for Buchnevich, and then re-signed Buchnevich to a long extension. And I absolutely love this addition for the St. Louis Blues. He's a legitimate first-line guy. He is a top-line player. He had a great year last year, put up a ton of points, and I think he's really going to help the offense here in St. Louis and just kind of add another dimension and another really high-end offensive player to this lineup. And I have no doubt that he's going to put up points in a Blues uniform. And, with them losing Schwartz and Hoffman and Blais and Sanford and the guys that they have lost up front, getting Buchnevich was a huge add to this team, as was Brandon Saad. Now, Brandon Saad, maybe not the star player that he once was, or the star in the making when he was in Chicago, and he was getting all this attention and fanfare and stuff, but he's still a very, very solid middle six scorer. He's coming off a decent year with the Avalanche last year. When you lose, to me, Brandon Saad replaces Jaden Schwartz. Losing Jaden Schwartz definitely hurt, but Brandon Saad's going to come in and play, at least production-wise, that role and produce at a very similar amount as Jaden Schwartz, maybe even a little bit more. So, I absolutely love those additions for the Blues. I think Buchnevich and Saad are both going to improve this offense and really have a big impact on the team and help them a lot. So I'm excited to see those two play with St. Louis. They also added Logan Brown in the Zach Sanford trade. Now, Brown was, in Ottawa, just kind of on that, waiting to break out. Didn't really have a full breakout in Ottawa. It's going to be interesting to see what he does with the Blues and where he's at as far as his development goes, if he's more of an extra player or if he is good enough to kind of finally have that breakout season. But young guy, good potential, and I think he has probably a little bit higher ceiling. Like, Zach Sanford is what he is, and I think that's going to be what he is for his career. Brown might bring a little bit more of an upwards potential, but hasn't quite solidified his spot in the NHL yet. So he's going to be an interesting guy to watch, especially in training camp in the preseason, to see what he looks like and then see over the course of this year, where he ends up, whether he plays more in the AHL or if he plays more in the NHL or, where he is in the lineup and whatnot. And they also added depth defenseman Calle Rosen. But other than that, they didn't really add anything to the D. So, they're going to definitely be relying on guys from within to replace the loss of Dunn and replace the loss of Gunderson. But they've got some good young defensemen that are probably going to be able to do it. And now it's time to look at my projected roster for the St. Louis Blues this year and take a look at who I think is making it and who are the depth guys. So, projected roster for St. Louis, I mean, obviously there's a few spots up for grabs here. And they've got some really interesting guys in on PTOs as well, in James Neal and Michael Frolik. But up front, obviously, Ryan O'Reilly, Braden Shen, Vladimir Tarasenko. We haven't mentioned him yet in this video, but Tarasenko, after all the turmoil this offseason and the trade request and all of that, he's still a St. Louis Blue. He was not traded. The Blues could not find a trade partner that would give them a deal that they were willing to agree to. So Tarasenko is back, and this could be a big year for him. He needs to stay healthy. Obviously, he hasn't been able to do that the last number of years. That shoulder is a huge question mark. This is a big year for Tarasenko to stay healthy, get back to being at least a 20 to 25 goal scorer. I don't think he's probably not going to score 30, but get back into the 20s and start producing again and see if he can get things back on track after having so many issues with that shoulder. But he's still on the Blues as far as right now. Buchnevich and Saad come in. David Perron's still there. Young guys, Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas. They're going to play significant roles on this team. And then you get down to the depth guys. Ivan Barbashev. Tyler Bozak is back on a one-year deal. Kyle Clifford. Mackenzie McEachern. I think, Logan Brown to me is like right on that line of NHL or AHL. And I think whether or not he makes the team right away is going to largely be determined if they decide to keep these guys on PTOs and actually sign them, or if they release them both from their PTO and then Logan Brown probably makes the team at that point. But we'll have to see how that works out over the course of training camp. On the defensive side of things, Colton Parayko, Torrey Krug, Justin Falk, those are your top three guys easily. Then you get after that, you've got Marco Scandella. Jake Waldman, definitely expect him to play a pretty big role at the NHL level this year. I think they might be looking at Jake Waldman to kind of be that Vince Dunn replacement. He's definitely going to get an opportunity for that. Robert Bortuzzo, he's your veteran bottom pair guy, physical guy. And then Nico Mikola, he could definitely work his way into the lineup. He certainly will play games. I have him being probably the number 7 defenseman right now, but he'll definitely play games this season. And in goal, you return the same tandem as last season, Jordan Binnington and Ville Husso. That certainly does put a lot of pressure on Binnington to play a lot of games and have a really good year and win a lot of those games, because Ville Husso, let's be honest, hasn't exactly put up great numbers in the NHL. And definitely not one of the better backups in the league. He's certainly a backup goaltender where, a lot of other teams have the whole tandem thing going on. That's kind of taken over the NHL. There's not going to be much of a tandem here. Binnington is going to play a large majority of these games. And now we get to the depth side of things, where this gets interesting because they have James Neal and Michael Frolik in on PTOs. And looking at the overall depth offensively of this team and just their forward groups in general, I think there's a good chance that they keep at least one of these guys, if not both. And obviously James Neal is off to a great start with a hat trick in the first preseason game, but I would not at all be surprised if at least one of these guys gets a contract from the Blues. For added depth and just filling out that forward group. And then that, I think, would knock Logan Brown probably down into a more AHL role if Neal made it or if Frolik made it and whatnot. But those two, it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening with those two as far as whether they get signed or not. Oscar Sundquist is still on LTIR. He obviously had a major knee injury last year. Not sure when he's going to be back. He should be able to come back at some point this year, but he's not ready right now. So when he eventually is ready, that he'll get added in a depth role for this team. And then they've got Klim Kostin, who they're still kind of waiting to make that jump. He was pretty highly touted prospect that hasn't found it at the NHL level yet. But he'll definitely have a chance to be called up if they start running into injury issues. And then they've got Dakota Joshua, who played some NHL games last year. He's a fourth line type guy, but if you need a depth piece and you've got guys out of the lineup, he could also certainly get a call up as well. On the back end, Scott Perunovich, definitely their top defensive prospect. They're waiting for him to make that NHL jump. I don't think it's likely that he starts in the NHL right away, but I do think it's very likely that he'll be playing NHL games at some point this season. I just think they're going to go with the guys with more experience to start the season, and then if somebody gets injured or somebody has a really bad start to the year, then you definitely could see Perunovich get called up. He's certainly the top defenseman on the call-up list, and I fully expect him to play some NHL games this season. And they've got Steve Santini as well, also Callie Rosen, who they brought in. Those are kind of more veteran, just borderline AHL, NHL guys who aren't going to start in the NHL, but could be called up if needed. And as far as a third goaltender goes, I'm not really sure what to expect as far as a third goalie with this team. They really need to hope that nothing happens to Jordan Binnington, because they're not overly deep in net. They've got John Gillies, who's a free agent, but he's an invite to their training camp. And they've got Charlie Lindgren as well down in the AHL. He'll probably end up being the third goaltender. But again, they really need Jordan Binnington to stay healthy. There is no doubt about that. But that is my projected roster for the St. Louis Blues. Obviously, there's a few spots up for grabs, but I think a lot of St. Louis's lineup is pretty well intact. So the Blues are definitely going to be an interesting team this year. I think they certainly can make the playoffs. I think they could finish as high as second or third in that Central Division if things go well. If maybe they're a little bit more of a disappointment and things don't go as well, then you're looking at, a team that could maybe be down in like the fifth spot, somewhere around there. So it's going to be an interesting season for them. I really don't know. Are they good enough? Like it seems like there's a little bit missing, but at the same time, I like the moves that they made. I love the Sada and Buchnevich additions. I think it's really just going to come down to, do they play better defensively? Like if they can keep the puck out of their net a little bit better, this team could be a very good team. But if they give up goals the way that they did last year, I think they're going to be like right on that playoff line, and it's going to be a real tight standings all season as far as whether they get in the postseason or not. So it's definitely going to be interesting with this team. They certainly have potential, but it also feels like there are some question marks there, and obviously a ton is riding on Jordan Binnington in goal. If he doesn't have a good season, then they're in big trouble, because they really don't have anywhere else to turn as far as goaltending other than Jordan Binnington. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, our merch store, memberships, and donation links are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.